The morning in Foxborough started with what felt like an absolute nightmare, sending shockwaves across the entire fan base before the session had barely begun. Two rapid-fire interceptions against a championship-caliber defense had social media declaring that the Philadelphia Eagles were in full-blown crisis mode. Yet, when the dust finally settled and the full truth of what happened behind closed doors came to light, it completely shattered the panic narrative and revealed something far more dangerous brewing in Philadelphia. Before we dive deep into the real numbers, the hidden film details, and what this actually means for the 2026 season, take a quick second to hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another breakdown. How often do we see the online world take a 5-second clip or a single social media post and blow it completely out of proportion before anyone even knows the context? That exact overreaction defined the 14th practice of Philadelphia Eagles training camp. When you step onto the field for joint practices against the reigning American Football Conference champion New England Patriots, the intensity reaches a level that regular camp sessions simply cannot simulate. This was not a controlled scrimmage against teammates where coaches blow the whistle early to protect reputations. This was a hostile environment in the Patriots' home territory, facing an elite defense executing at peak tempo with their own crowd watching every single snap. From the very first drive of the day, disaster struck. The grass had barely been warmed up when the very first pass of the session sailed directly into the hands of a New England defender. Moments later, on another contested rep against a physical secondary, the ball was picked off for a second time. Within 15 minutes, the feeds were on fire. The chatter online was merciless, claiming that the offense had stalled, the quarterback had collapsed under pressure, and the entire summer buildup was falling apart. However, the reality of what actually took place over those 2 hours told an entirely different story. When veteran Philadelphia beat reporter Elliot Shore-Parks compiled his comprehensive daily evaluation, the grade he assigned sent shockwaves through the fan base. He did not give a failing mark. He gave Jalen Hurts a solid B. To understand why that grade stunned so many casual observers, you have to look at the full statistical picture rather than a curated snippet of early mistakes. Over the course of that full-intensity practice, Jalen Hurts finished 9 of 15 passing. While a 60% completion rate might seem modest on the surface, the headline number sitting right beside it changes everything. 4 touchdown passes. Think about the magnitude of that production for a moment. For separate times during a live session against one of the most disciplined and suffocating defensive schemes in football, Hurts put the ball directly into the end zone. That was 4 distinct red zone and situational executions that completely ripped through the opponent's first-team coverage. Reducing a 2-hour battle down to 2 early mistakes while completely ignoring 4 scoring drives is the textbook definition of selective reporting. What makes this performance even more telling is the undeniable day-over-day progression. During the first day of joint practices in Foxborough, Shore-Parks had assigned Hurts a grade of C- after an undeniably bumpy outing. That meant New England's defensive staff had a full 24 hours to study the film, identify Philadelphia's tendencies, make targeted schematic adjustments, and throw even more disguised coverages at him on day 2. Yet, despite facing a defense that was far more prepared, Hurts elevated his execution, raised his efficiency, and pushed his grade all the way to a B. That kind of upward trajectory within a single 24-hour window proves that the quarterback and the coaching staff are actively digesting lessons and correcting their flaws on the fly. The peak of that growth culminated in the final team drill of the afternoon, the high-leverage situational period that both coaching staffs treat as the true decisive test of the entire joint session. The coaches placed the football 25 yards away from the end zone, and both teams sent their absolute top units onto the turf with the practice on the line. Under the heaviest defensive pressure of the day, Hurts orchestrated a clinic in situational execution. On consecutive snaps, he delivered precise strikes to Dallas Goedert and Dontavian Wicks, slicing through the intermediate zones and driving the offense all the way down to the 5-yard line. Then came the defining snap of the entire trip. The pocket began to squeeze, the pass rush collapsed inward, and the windows tightened. This was the exact scenario where critics constantly claim Hurts panics, bails too early, or loses his eyes downfield. Instead of fleeing the pocket, Hurts stood tall in the face of oncoming contact, reset his feet, showed supreme patience to let the route concept breathe, and fired a laser to Marquise Hollywood Brown for the go-ahead touchdown. To remove all doubt, he stepped right back up to the line and delivered a flawless pass to Darius Cooper on the two-point conversion to lock down the victory in the drill. That sequence was not an accident or a stroke of luck. That was a masterclass in pocket poise, trust and protection, and calm under fire. Erasing two ugly early turnovers to engineer a walk-off scoring drive against a premier defense requires mental toughness that very few players in this league possess. This brings us directly to our question of the day. Taking everything into account, the 4 touchdowns, the 2 early picks, and that ice-cold walk-off drive in the decisive drill. Do you believe those turnovers are a major warning sign for September, or are they simply normal growing pains of an offense building towards something special? Drop your thoughts, grades, and predictions in the comments down below. To fully grasp why these early session struggles were not only understandable, but entirely expected, you have to examine the immense structural overhaul happening inside the Eagles building. The entire offensive architecture is undergoing a complete reset. The team has moved on from previous play caller Kevin Patullo, handing the reins over to Sean Mannion to install an entirely brand new system. Anyone who understands the mechanics of an NFL coordinator change knows that August is always messy. A new playbook means new terminology, foreign route timing, adjusted site adjustments, and entirely different pre-snap reads. Quarterbacks and wide receivers are actively learning how to see the defense through the exact same set of eyes under full-speed conditions. There will be balls thrown half a second off schedule. There will be miscommunications on option routes where the quarterback expects a break outside while the receiver sits down in a soft zone. That is the entire purpose of scheduling joint practices against elite opponents. You do not travel to Foxborough to protect an unblemished practice stat line or look pretty for social media clips. You go there to push the limits of your playbook, stress test your communication, and expose every structural weakness while the calendar still reads August. A turnover caused by a miscommunication in summer costs nothing more than a brief bruise to the ego. That exact same mistake left undiscovered until December against a fierce division rival will destroy your playoff seeding. Every turnover Hurts suffered against New England was invaluable information given to Sean Mannion's staff for free. Compounding this transition is the seismic roster shift on the outside. For the past 4 seasons, this passing attack was built around the dominant physical presence of A.J. Brown, who commanded massive target volume and dictated how opposing defenses aligned. But with A.J. Brown having departed Philadelphia and now standing on the opposite sideline wearing a Patriots uniform, the Eagles have had to fundamentally reinvent how they move the football. Hurts is not just adapting to a new coordinator. He is doing so while establishing entirely new chemistry across the board. Devonta Smith has stepped forward into the undisputed number 1 role, while the offense is actively incorporating multiple dynamic targets into the weekly game plan. When you look back at the scoring drives and the decisive moments in Foxborough, the ball found 4 different targets: Dallas Goedert, Dontavian Wicks, Hollywood Brown, and Darius Cooper. That level of wide-open distribution is a breath of fresh air. It represents the exact opposite of the hyper-predictable one-target dependency that previously bogged down this offense and created friction in the locker room. When an offense spreads the field with multiple reliable weapons rather than forcing balls into a single superstar, it forces defensive coordinators to defend all 11 players on every blade of grass. To be completely fair and objective, we cannot ignore the real concerns that still exist. Practice statistics are not official league records, and a solid B grade earned during a hot afternoon in August does not guarantee a single victory when the regular season begins. First and foremost, the 2 turnovers happened, and they cannot simply be wiped away. The opening interception was an aggressive throw into tight coverage aimed at Hollywood Brown, and ball security remains a critical fundamental that this team must clean up immediately. Second, The beat report openly stated that the offense slogged through long stretches of inefficiency before finding its rhythm. If the Eagles develop a habit of sleepwalking through the first half of games and attempting to rely on heroic fourth-quarter comebacks, elite teams will build leads that are impossible to overcome. A thrilling, clutch finish does not completely erase 2 hours of inconsistent football. The central issue is not whether this team possesses the resilience to battle back when adversity hits, but whether they can eliminate the self-inflicted mistakes that put them in a hole in the first place. At the same time, viewing this practice purely as a failure ignores the immense promise in the data. Navigating a completely foreign offensive scheme, shaking off early mistakes, putting 4 touchdowns on the board against the top defense in the AFC, and delivering the highest leverage throw of the day from a crowded pocket is an incredibly encouraging baseline. If this gritty, high-production performance represents the growing pains of Philadelphia's new offensive identity, the ceiling for this team, once the timing truly locks, and is higher than anyone dared to imagine. As September rapidly approaches, the stage is set for this rebuilt unit to prove whether their Foxborough comeback was a temporary spark or the true foundation of their championship pursuit.